Steve, so you.
All right, thank you. As some of you may or may not know, I am the editor of Railfan Railroad magazine, and 2024 marks the 50th anniversary of Railfan. As part of that celebration, we're going to be issuing a book this fall called Railfan After Dark. It'll largely feature photos from me and my predecessor at Railfan, editor Jim Boyd. And we'll also be doing some activities on the Woodstown Central in November as part of the 50th anniversary. So anyhow, with the book coming out in November, I thought it was a good time to go back and review some of my night photos. Plus, I had to make up an outline for the book too, so this kind of helped. This is my journey into the dark. My very first night photo session was a group session at the East Broad Top Railroad during the Winter Spectacular back in 1978. Back then, everything was lit with number 2 flashbulbs, and it was painting with light. One or two people would take a Graflex flash gun with great big number 2 flashbulbs and fire a bulb, eject it, run to the next location, fire a bulb, eject it. It would take anywhere from 15 seconds to over a minute, depending on the number of flashes you needed to fire, and number of people you had to throw in the flash. My first group session with Jim Boyd, my predecessor, was at Steamtown up in Bellows Falls, Vermont. We had 3 Canadian Pacific 462s under steam. And for scenes like this, the 2929 is actually a dead locomotive, but they ran a steam pipe from the locomotive next to it that was alive and simulated steam coming out of the 2929. Jim was also famous for his night photo sessions at the Cass Scenic Railroad during the Cass Railfan weekends. These sessions would often draw upwards of 200 photographers to take the photos. The nice thing about the group night photo sessions is that one set of bulbs could light up a scene for any number of photographers, as long as they were on tripods and cable releases. That was a good way to defray the costs of all the number 2 flash bulbs, because they were, at the time, 1980 prices. They were $2 a piece, which back then was a decent chunk of change when you're lighting up a scene using 12 flash bulbs. For a scene like this, you not only had to light up the entire train, but also have somebody up on the street lighting up the houses in the background. So it went through the bulbs. The first NRHS convention that I attended a night photo session with Jim Boyd was the 1979 convention in Washington, D.C. For that convention, Amtrak and Washington Terminal lined up 8 locomotives, all different, across the tracks at Ivy City Engine Terminal. Here we see 5 of the 8 locomotives, and here are 2 others. That was Washington Terminal's FAUR quarter horse that they had for a switcher. Yes, Hungarian, for those out in Zoomland. Also part of that night photos, that convention was this night photo session on the Southern in Alexandria with Royal Hudson 2839 and Southern 280 722. 1980 convention in Toronto featured a couple of CP Rail Alcos at the Agen Courtyard near Toronto. 1983 was this triple crossing night photo down in Richmond, Virginia. Norfolk Southern and CSX were the railroads at the time, but they cooperated by posing trains on all 3 levels of the triple crossing. 1985 was the Lancaster Convention. PRR 7002 and 1223 were the featured attractions at the night photo that year. And other night photo sessions not associated with conventions were held. Here's one up at Steamtown when it was still the Steamtown Foundation up in Scranton for one of the Railfan weekends. And going back to the NRHS conventions, this is the 1986 Boston convention. We had to send somebody over to the mobile station and have them turn off the tower light because it was messing up our photos. So to get started in night photography, because I didn't have flash bulbs and a flash gun, I used existing light. Here you see the K4 1361 in Altoona on the very first night it was fired up back in 1984. Other existing light shots include this scene here at Port Jervis, New York. NJ Transit U-34s all lined up in the yard. And out in California, we're at the Millbrae station near the airport, a Caltrain train coming through the what was then the new Millbrae station. And up at the Conklin Yard in Binghamton, New York, on a very, very foggy night, Susquehanna engine parked outside of the former Lackawanna Tower in Conklin Yard. Finally, I got a flash gun and some flash bulbs. And this was during a Blue Mountain and Reading Railfan weekend at Temple, PA. Now, back then, because it took, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute to light up a scene, the train's headlight couldn't be left on because it would blow the whole scene out. So this was about 2 in the morning. I stumbled out to the locomotive. I was sleeping in the parking lot. Stumbled out to the locomotive, found the hostler, and talked to him. I said, "Hey, when you see my first flash go off, flip on the headlight for about 3 seconds and turn it back off again." So I fired my first flash from the left of the scene here. He saw it, flipped the headlight on, flipped it off. Then I ran across the tracks behind the locomotive and threw another flash up on the hopper cars in the background. This scene here is in Hyndman, Pennsylvania, back when the helpers for Sandpatch Grade were still based in Hyndman. The tower was still manned at the time. So we went to the tower operator and said, "Hey, we want to do some night photos down at the helpers." He's going to see our flashes. We couldn't just sneak back there and do it. He said, "Yeah, no problem." He said, "When you're done," he said, "come back to the tower here. We got a new batch of hats here. You can buy a hat." So we said, "Okay." So we're out here shooting the helpers at Hyndman, and just as we're wrapping up, this high rail pulls up, and this guy in this white hard hat is inside. And I thought, "Oh crap, we're doomed." And he rolls down his window, leans over, and says, "Hey, when you guys are finished, go to the tower. We got some new hats that just came in. You can buy them." This is a scene that was taken during the 1988 Garden State Convention. Now, back then, because we had to fire the flashes individually, we had to send somebody way down to the tower with a flash gun to light up the tower. And I was up by the locomotive. I would yell down, "Hey, you ready?" He would yell back, "Yeah, he's ready." And then he would watch my first flash on the engine. When he saw that, he would fire flashes down on the tower. This is a scene we did at the Little Ferry Engine Terminal on the Susquehanna up in North Jersey one night. You can see the 30-second, this is probably about a minute exposure. You can see the stars are moving because of the long exposure. This is in Dumontaine at the end of the CN electrified line out of Gare Centrale in downtown Montreal. We got here, we set up our tripods to do a shot. We had the flash bulbs out. The engineer of the MU comes over to us and says something to us in French. I said, I'm sorry, I don't speak French." His conductor said, "Oh," he says, he wants to know if you need the train moved somewhere for a better shot." I'm like, "No, it's good where it is. Thank you. Thank you." This was in Lynn Creek Yard in Vancouver, British Columbia. We saw this engine sitting in the back of the yard, all dark with the lights out. We talked to the yard master and said, "We'd like to get a shot of that engine back there." He said, "Yeah, no problem." We said, "Too bad the lights are out, but we'll manage." So we're walking back to the engine, and next thing we know, the yard master's running behind us, and he has keys to the locomotive. And he opens up the engine, gives us a quick lesson on how to work all the lights, and then says, "Have fun." He leaves. And that's one of our guys, one of our Railfan guys, posing as a brakeman on the front of the locomotive there. Bensonville near Chicago was a great spot. The shop sat right on the street. I'm actually standing on the sidewalk, public sidewalk, getting this shot of a Sioux Line locomotive at the ex-Milwaukee shop building here. Here's a shot we did up in South Scranton on the Lackawanna Valley, the predecessor of today's Delaware Lackawanna. Now the signal does not work. In fact, it was just a hole in the signal head. So what we did was, before we did any other flashes, we had one guy climb the ladder up to the signal. He held a red shirt up to the hole in the signal from behind the signal and fired a flash through the shirt, through the signal, to give the red light. And then he climbed down the ladder, and then we proceeded to light up the rest of the train. This was the last night photo session for our NRHS convention that I attended that used flashbulbs. This is at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. And for this shot here, they actually had all of the flashes synchronized, which is hard to do with flashbulbs because you had to run miles of wire to get it all synced up together. But we have a Burlington E5 back at the depot and a North Shore car sitting at the interurban station here. This is a night photo session on the New York Cross Harbor in 1990. This was the very first session I attended where we didn't use flash bulbs, but instead used electronic flash. Lumidyne had brought out a system that was a pack about a foot long, size of a shoebox, basically, with a flash head. You still had to run around and fire the flashes individually. But Kermit Geary was the first one to buy a Lumidyne set, and this was all lit up with the Lumidyne. Now, once again, it was hard on one person because to backlight the smoke, you had to light up the front of the locomotive with 3 or 4 or 5 flashes, then run behind the engine and shoot a flash up into the smoke to backlight the smoke. Took some time, and you had to do some hoofing to get these things done. This was a shot we did on the Delaware Lackawanna. This is at the tower at Cresco, Pennsylvania. For this shot here, we had, I think, 2 or 3 people with Lumidynes. I had bought one by this time. Back then, 1991, Lumidynes cost about $1,400 for a usable set for rare photography. My job here was to light the nose of the locomotive. Other folks handled the side. I lit the nose, and I had to run through the brambles inside the tower and throw a flash inside the tower to light up the interior, which is kind of spooky in the dark because you have no other light, just pitch black. This shot here is at the Danbury Railway Museum. Their steam engine isn't out very much, but they had brought it out this night for a night photo. We're actually across the main street in Danbury from the museum. And our photo line is set up, and we cannot get a break in the traffic. Cars are going by all the time. We just couldn't get a break. Finally, the guy next to me says, "Hey, you got a cell phone?" I said, "Yeah, just let me have it." I handed him my cell phone. Turns out he is the deputy police chief of Danbury. Next thing you know, we have 2 squad cars out blocking the street so we can get our shot done. This is a night photo session for the NRHS convention in Portland, Oregon. At the Brooklyn Roundhouse in Portland, Doyle McCormick set it up for us. This was in July, and July in Portland, it gets dark real late. This night photo session was actually scheduled to run from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., and we took the entire amount of time to get it done, but it was worth it. For this shot here on the Grand Canyon Railway down in Arizona, once again, my job was to light up the nose of the locomotive. Then I had to scramble down the embankment down into the creek bed and fire up a flash at the smoke and steam to backlight it. Once again, you can see some stars, how long this exposure is. The stars are moving there. I'm like, how am I going to get down this hillside without breaking my neck in the dark? So we had big, powerful lights set up to get the scene set up, like construction lights. So I'm up in the middle of the tracks, ready to light the nose up. They turn off the construction lights. It's a full moon, and a full moon in Arizona is bright, let me tell you. I had absolutely no trouble navigating down to the creek bed for the second flash. This is a shot here. We're going back to the flash bulbs here instead of the electronic, but I wanted to show you something here. For this scene here, this is one that Jim Boyd lit up at Steamtown up in Vermont. But he had to get flash on the sides of the locomotives on the left and on the right. And the only way to do that was to stand in the middle of the scene. How do you do that? He donned a denim jacket and a engineer's cap, ran out into the middle of the scene, pretended to be throwing the switch. Meanwhile, he held the flash gun down by his hip and aimed it and fired it at the locomotive. So he got the nose of the middle engine and the sides of the other two from the middle of the scene. I stole that technique several years later. I had to light up the caboose and the engine on the right from inside. So I posed these guys out in the middle of the scene, and then I crouched down behind them and fired the flashes. If you look carefully, you can see the ghost of me crouched down behind the conductor in the middle of the scene there. Here's a shot we did of the Erie E8s for the United Railway Historical Society. This is at Monmouth Park up in North Jersey under a full moon. And here's a very weird night photo session we did at the Whippany Railway Museum. Probably one of the most bizarre night photo sessions we've ever done. This is a shot from 2000 over at Juniata Terminal in Philadelphia, Bennett Levin's E8s. This is in 2000, and it's significant for one reason. Somebody in our group that night had a digital camera. It was the first time ever we had ever seen a digital camera. And this gave us instant feedback. Finally, we could tell if we were missing any spots, throwing the flash, any glare bouncing back. Because before then, it was all guesswork. You shot the shot and you waited a week for the film to come back and see what you got. This actually gave us a chance to see what our exposures were and where we needed to throw extra flash. It kind of changed everything in night photography. We're still running around, though, doing one flash at a time. For this shot here up in Morristown, New Jersey, on New Year's Eve, we found everybody, by this time about 5 or 6 of us had purchased Lumidynes. And we got everybody together and we strung them all together with extension cords to synchronize them. And at midnight, when the fireworks went off, we were able to fire off all the Lumidynes all at once and light up the scene here. This is down in Mississippi. When Iowa Pacific was running one of the short lines down there in Grenada. Now, this is the next phase of night photography. The Lumidynes are now out. A company called Paul C. Buff in Nashville had invented a studio system for interior shots called Alien Bees. But the Alien Bees had a big advantage of you could synchronize them with radios from your camera. So all the flashes went off all at once. So we no longer had to blink headlights or anything like that. If you leave the headlights on, we could just string up a string of Alien Bees and light the scene with like 3, 2, 1, poof, and it was done. So now we're into the era of synchronized flash. Here we are at Steamtown up in Scranton with a 759. The smoke and steam, that's just commercial fireworks smoke bombs we purchased that dropped down the stack and placed on the cylinders. This shot here we did at Steamtown about, oh gosh, time flies, probably 7 years ago now. Once again, all synchronized. Rainstorm, we had to put bags. So the Alien Bees are made for interior strobe work, and we were using them outdoors, and they don't like moisture, don't like rain at all. What we wound up doing was buying the garbage bags they use for recycling that are clear and putting them over the flashes. Once again, we use commercial smoke bombs to bring some life to the locomotive. The guy on the front, that's Nick Hovey, his job in the rain was, between shots, was to run up the ladder to the top of the locomotive without slipping, drop a smoke bomb down the stack and run back down and pose for the shot. Here's what we did down in Mississippi on the revived Rock Island. Now, the nice thing about the synchronized flashes is you can start a whole lot sooner. With the old one at a time flash, we had to run around and pop one individual flashes. You had to be dark to really get started. Now we were able, with the synchronized flashes, to be able to start shooting right at sunset. So we got some nice orange glow in the sky here for this shot. This is a synchronized shot on the Cooperstown and Charlotte Valley up in Milford, New York. The dots you see, that's rain coming down. Once again, we had the flashes all bagged up, but the light froze the raindrops in the sky. For the Tacoma convention, rather, the Tacoma convention for the NRHS, our night photo was out at Tacoma Rail using the 4449. And we had planned to do all the shots from ground level. And we got there and we're setting up, and Tacoma Rail people, they came out and said, hey, if you guys want to use the tower steps for shots, feel free to do so. So a few at a time, we ran up to the tower steps and able to shoot this shot here with the port in the background. For this shot here, this is on the Tavares Eustis and Gulf, the Orange Blossom Cannonball down in Florida. This cool little traffic circle had the tracks going right through it. So I wanted to do a shot in the circle. So the railroad called the local town, said, hey, we want to do a shot in the circle. Can you can we close it off for the evening for a few minutes? And the town said, it's not our circle. Call the state police. So he called the state police. State police says, it's not our circle either, but we're kind of curious. So we're going to come down and watch this. So the railroad had to actually recruit some of their own people to close the street off temporarily while the police sat there and watched while we lit this all up. Sometimes I'll do stuff without using the flashes. We were set up for a night photo here, and the flashes were all set up for this shot. But I did this shot at a time exposure without any flash at all, right at sunset. Once again, you can see some star movement because I used about a 30-second exposure to get this. Oh, sorry, it's the Heber Valley out in Utah. We're up at White River Junction in Vermont. Once again, this was set up to be lit up with strobes, but I used just the light that was there to get this scene here with the car headlights and the locomotive lights on. And this shot here, once again, we're up at Conklin Yard in Binghamton. The long exposure, the existing light, let me get the headlight beam coming out of the headlight nice and clear. And this is no flash. I just pulled up into Crescent, Pennsylvania, and saw this scene here with the moon backlighting these tank cars. So I just set up and did an existing light shot. Digital photography has really changed the game because you can get instant feedback and adjust accordingly. So getting a moving train. Back in the film days, the best you could do with a moving train without investing $1 million in flash bulbs, flash guns, and extension cords was to do these streaks of light shots. Here we see the Amtrak's Cardinal leaving the station in Crawfordsville, Indiana, going through a set of former Monon Railroad semaphores that are now gone, but were on short time back then. This is in Lusk, Nebraska. Existing light shot, probably about a minute and a half. This train streaking by this water tank in Lusk. Once again, get the stars in the sky. But I also have my flashes with me. And here's the difference between an existing light shot and then a strobe shot. Now, okay, this train's moving. The question I always get, do these flashes bother the train crew? 80% of the train crews could care less. Of the remaining 10%, of the remaining 20%, 10% are really excited about it. They really enjoy this. And you always, when the train's just coming into the site, because the strobe's recycled in 5 seconds, you can pop a couple of times so they can see the flashes down the tracks ahead of them. And anymore, most of them know what's going on at this point. Then the other 10% of the crews hate it. But they're the crews that usually hate their dogs, hate their wives. They got on the train mad that night, and there's another reason for them to be mad. This is my very first synchronized night photo. I set up at the tower in Nova, Ohio. And I had my flashes positioned so that I could spin them on the flash heads. So if an eastbound showed up first, I could spin them, get the eastbound. Or the shot I really wanted was the westbound with the get a westbound, or I could spin them to get the shot I really wanted was an eastbound passing the tower. So I'm all set up and I'm waiting for trains. So I'm sitting there. Suddenly I hear horns off to the east. I hear horns off to the west. Horns off to the east, horns off to the west. I'm like, who's going to get here first? So finally, they're both getting pretty close. I said, heck with it. I'm going to go for my primary shot. I'm going to shoot the westbound passing the tower. So the westbound popped out from behind the tower. I fired the flashes, looked at the back of the camera, and I got both trains moving at about 40 miles an hour each, going by each other here. Just dumb luck on my very first night shot. I had my scanner on, and the crews are talking back and forth. And one of the crews said to the other one, "Yeah, I got to back up and do it again. My eyes were closed." This is in Nelson, Illinois. This is on the same trip, my very first trip. A train showed up at about 10 o'clock at night, and I was still setting up because my extension cords. So I was trying to be cheap and use only one battery and then run cords to all the lights. My extension cords are badly tangled, and I was untangling cords when the first train at 10 showed up. Finally got everything untangled, waited. This train finally came by at 2 a.m. And I got home from this trip, and I immediately ordered more batteries, so every flash would have a battery. You see one of the alien bees on the lower left-hand side of the frame here. For a setup like this, each bee costs about $240 for the flash head, $240 for a battery. Then you had the light stand, which is $30. The radio receiver for each flash is about $80. And then you need one transmitter for your camera, which attaches to the hot shoe, and that costs about $70. So a good 3 or 4 light setup will cost about $2,000. This is at Crawfordsville, Indiana again. This is the Cardinal again on that very first trip. I set up here at the semaphores, and other folks have been doing night shots here by now. The train popped around the curve further back. As soon as he popped around the curve, I fired a couple of heads-up flashes. Right after I fired the first flash, I got 2 toots back on the horn from the train. I said, okay, he knows what's going on. He's ready for this, so no problem. This is a shot I did at Fort Spring, West Virginia, a 4-flash shot. You see one of the flashes, I couldn't hide it. It's down beyond the signal bridge there to light up the tunnel portal. When I was first starting out with synchronized flash, the easiest way to light things up was just do a 3/4. It was predictable. You knew what the results were going to be. Just light everything nice and evenly, predictably. Here we see a shot at Doswell, Virginia, going by Squashapenny Junction. Southbound Amtrak train on the old RF&P. About a year later, I got an email from an engineer for Amtrak, who was the engineer this night on this train. And he emailed me and said, I remember that night. I remember the flashes going off. He said, and I thought, wow, really cool. Oh, Winston Link. He said, I'm really glad I found this shot online. Like I said, some crews are real enthused about it. This shot here is in Newcastle, California. Going away shot, a locomotive pushing a push-pull set into the tunnel at Newcastle. We were setting up here, and cops showed up. And usual questions: do you work for the railroad? No. You got permission to be here? No. You know you're trespassing, right? And I'm like, yeah. I said, we know when the train's going to be here. We know which track it's going to be on. There's a set of signals behind us that will alert us for any other movements in the direction. I said, really, if we couldn't do this safely, we wouldn't be doing this. He took our licenses and was running a check on them. They came back from his car, handed us our licenses back. He says, you know what? He says, the check hasn't come back yet. He says, but I think you guys are going to check out okay. He says, I'm going to get out of here, not get in your way, so have fun. The famous Railfan platform in Jessup, Georgia. Night shot there. This shot here is actually a going away shot. This is the helper set on the Pocahontas district. on Norfolk Southern in West Virginia. We got the original Norfolk Southern Heritage Unit pushing the train into the tunnel with the Norfolk and Western Heritage Unit in front of it. For this shot here, as the helper set came around the curve behind us, we fired the heads up flash in case the guy was looking in his mirror on the helper set. Well, he was. And we fired the heads up flash, and he immediately turned on the ditch lights and opened the window and leaned down and waved. So it looked like the train was coming at us in the shot. We're at Bridgeport. This is back when they were running ethanol down to SMS. This train's coming up across the bridge at Bridgeport, and it came to a stop after we fired the shot here, and the conductor got off. I'm like, oh, now what do we do? He comes over to us and says, hey, any of you guys got a cigarette? We're like, no. I said, but however, I said, we really want to get the shot at Woodbury tonight too. I said, if you guys drag your heels to get into Woodbury, we'll run the Wawa, grab you some cigarettes, and we'll meet you in Woodbury. So they agreed to that. And here's our conductor at Woodbury ready to get his cigarettes in exchange for letting us get ahead of him and get the night shot. He says, how much do I owe you for the cigarettes? We're like, no, thank you. We got greedy for 2 shots tonight. Appreciate it. This shot here is in Luray, Virginia. Winston Link shot a shot here back in the 50s at Hawksbill Creek, but he shot it from the opposite side. It's the famous Link shot of the kids playing in the creek with a steam train going overhead. This is a Link location, as is this. This is Rural Retreat, Virginia. And Link did his famous shot here with a Y-class steam locomotive going away with the brakeman on the platform holding up the lantern. Sometimes you just, when you're in the South, you just got to pay homage to Mr. Link, because he was the true pioneer in all of this. And no one will ever duplicate what he did, ever. Here we are in Midway, Kentucky. Railroad Drug is across the street there. An R.J. Corman, Kentucky train going through the middle of town. Midway is named for the railroad location that was midway between Frankfort and Louisville. This is the old Seaboard Station in Lakeland, Florida. Platforms are still there. Head house is gone. And this is the street running in Augusta, Georgia. This shot here is in Albany, Georgia. And I had heard that trains use the street here every night. So I thought it was Norfolk Southern branch. So we're setting up for the shot, waiting for the train to show up. And cop comes by. I got talking to him. I said, do trains actually come by here? He goes, yeah, every night train goes by here. I said, great. So I'm expecting a Norfolk Southern train. I can't see anything. Train's coming finally. Fire off the flash. Look at the back of the camera. And it's an orange engine and not a black engine. Like, what? What is? Well, come to find out, I accidentally discovered the Hilton and Albany Railroad. Didn't even know it was there. This is in Abingdon, Virginia, down near the Tennessee state line. The Abingdon Station. The White House on the right, that's where signal maintainers used to live back when they had quarters next to the tracks that they would patrol every day. And a famous shot on the Clinchfield Railroad down in Dant, Virginia. CSX business train going by the Union Baptist Church in Dant. This is a Michigan Central coaling tower in Michigan City, Indiana. But the only thing that uses this line anymore is Amtrak. And Amtrak did not stop for coal that night. Great place to watch trains is LaGrange, Kentucky. It has a long stretch of street running right down the middle of the street. And CSX has talked about routing the tracks outside of town. But LaGrange keeps saying, no, keep the tracks in the middle of town because that's their tourist attraction. Rail fans come from all over to photograph the street running here. Well, I was here one night and I was just going to camp out overnight in this and wait. Cop walked by. I said, "Hey, are there any restrictions about parking on the street overnight?" He goes, "No, no problem." I said, "Okay, great." So what I did was I set up my flashes, but I didn't deploy them. I just set them up and put them in front of the car. And I leaned back and was going to take a nap. And I had my scanner on, and LaGrange is far enough from anything that the only thing you're going to hear are trains calling signals on the scanner. And you could get about a 20-minute warning when the train first called a signal that you could hear. So I would just doze until I heard the train on the scanner pop awake, and there was a signal at the other end, off to the left here, at the end of town. And popped awake, looked at the signal. If the signal was green, I had an eastbound coming. The signal was red, I had a westbound coming. Pretty simple. And I can run around, get the flashes set up, and light up downtown LaGrange. Another view from downtown LaGrange. When the trains come through town here, the locomotives, from the time they hit the first bit of street running until they clear the last bit of street running, they go 10 miles an hour. Once the entire train occupies all of downtown, and locomotives clear the end of it, then they start picking up speed. We were here one time in the daytime, and there's restaurants now that set up on the sidewalk here. And we had lunch at one of the sidewalk restaurants, and we told the waitress, we said, "Hey, if the train comes," said, "we're all going to run and scatter to get pictures, but we'll be back, we promise." She goes, "Don't worry about it. People do it all the time." Here we are in Port Jervis, New York, Metro North, going by the old Erie Depot. This shot here, I didn't think I'd be able to light up. This is shooting across the Mohawk River up in near Amsterdam, New York. But I set up my flashes, aimed them across the river, did a test shot, looked at the back of the camera, like, wow, I can see across the river. So I set up for this shot at the Lakeshore Limited going by Lock 10. The hard part here was I needed a lot of flash across the river, but almost no flash on the white building close to me here. Otherwise, I'd have just blown the entire thing out. So I had to set the flashes, so I was just skimming the edge of the lock tenders building there while still getting full flash across the river. This is the tunnel underneath downtown Bellows Falls, Vermont. And this is out on Route 66. Here it is, the Jackrabbit Trading Post in Jackrabbit, Arizona. For this shot here, there's just no way around it. I set up a flash dead center of the photo, and I put my cap on it in a really lame attempt to disguise the flash. This is at Mance, Pennsylvania on Sand Patch Grade, the old post office, which is now somebody's cabin. And the church in Huntsdale, South Carolina on the old Clinchfield. They had restored the Clinchfield 800, the F unit, for the 75th running of the Santa train down there. Once again, it's raining. You can see the raindrops coming down the sky there. Toe River Baptist Church. Here we are in the rain again. You can see it coming off of the bridge in streams. This is at PU Tower in Phillipsburg. We used the bridge to stay out of the rain for this shot here. The reason we were in Phillipsburg was we pulled an all-nighter, as it turned out. Just after the sky started to get a little bit of light in it, UP's business train with the 1943, their veterans engine, or armed forces engine, came through past the old Phillipsburg Union Station. And we're down on the state line, Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee. It's a good place to live. I'm standing in both states, middle of State Street, getting this southbound Norfolk Southern train. And this is where Winston Link shot his very last night shot. He did it as a contract job for Railfan magazine on the Lehigh and Hudson River at Baird's Farm in Milford, New York. 30 years after the fact, I went up there and shot Susquehanna's road freight going through Baird's Farm. This shot here was just dumb luck again. This is in Atlanta, Georgia. The white building in the background used to be all Southern Railway offices. But we're at Terminal Tower here. And I had shot this train that's in the foreground going by from left to right. And I saw this train coming from right to left, 2 tracks over, off in the distance. So I kind of waited and waited and guessed and fired the flashes off. And somehow, just dumb luck, I managed to get a gap in the stacks, in the containers, to get the locomotive in the tower. This is the oldest highway bridge on the left in the state of Nevada. Amtrak's California Zephyr going by in the background. Normally the Zephyr goes through here at about 10 in the morning, so you can see it's running late. And Wauseon, Ohio, the old New York Central station, with one of Amtrak's 50th anniversary locomotives going by. We were setting up for a night photo down at the Tennessee Valley Railway Museum in Chattanooga of Tag 80. And while we were setting up, I heard a train coming on the Norfolk Southern Main Line that was just off to the right there. So I quickly ran across the tracks. There's a strobe you can see just at the left end of the bridge there. I took that strobe, spun it around, and aimed it towards the bridge, ran back to here. And when the NS train went by, I fired the flashes, and darn if it didn't work. Got both trains. This is at Petricktown, just down the road. One of the last coal trains, empty coal trains, coming back up from Deepwater, with the Norfolk Southern Wabash Heritage Unit leading. On the Black River and Western at Ringo's, I'm back at the old abandoned Huntington cement plant. I think I confused the crew here because I'm way back from the tracks, but I gave them the heads up flashes when they were coming up, and I could hear them back off on the throttle and start working again to make smoke. They're pretty cool about that. They didn't know where I was. They couldn't find me. So I could hear them working, and I could picture them just looking for me. And finally, they got here, and I fired off the flashes, but it all worked out. And also in the Black River and Western at that Copper Hill Viaduct, or trestle rather. This is on the what was then called the Northern Center. Back then it was called Steam into History. It's now the Northern Central. Brand new, last 15 years or so built, 1860s steam locomotive. And on the Wilmington and Western in Ashland, Delaware. I had set up this shot here with 2 strobes, one on each side of the tracks, but the one on my side, on the right side, didn't fire. And I kind of like the lighting better this way anyhow. A little bit of shadow down the side of the locomotive really brings out the entire bridge. And on the Strasburg at the Pumpkinville Turnpike, CN number 89 going over. The strobes have let us do some interesting things we couldn't do before. Here we see a shot we set up in a diner, an actual diner, in Lowell, Massachusetts. If you look out the window to the right there, you see a Lowell streetcar from the National Park coming up behind our diners here. And a self-portrait. You can do these now with the strobes. I would put the camera on a 10-second timer, fire the trigger, run up, get to the scene here, puff my cigar, and 10 seconds later, poof, off the flashes. And this is in Prince, West Virginia. I still do some time exposures. This is a 13-minute exposure at the Tehachapi Loop in California. The lights you can ignore are the red and white lights on the right side. That's the highway. And the light running diagonally from the left edge down towards the bottom. That's a truck on a dirt road. Everything else is all one train. It starts off with those bright lights down in the notch between the hills in the background there. Train comes up. It goes on that little horseshoe curve under the highway on the right-hand side. Behind the knoll, it comes out of Tunnel 9, which is on the left center, goes around the loop behind the knoll again, off the left-hand side of the picture, and comes back left to right down in the foreground here. It's all one train, all over about a 13-minute exposure. Also existing light, this is on Crawford Hill in Nebraska. Train was actually going away. I opened up the camera when the headlights started to illuminate the signals and left it open until the entire train went by. And once again, you can see the star streaks on the left-hand upper corner there. And this is the old 6th Street Viaduct in Los Angeles, a very famous bridge. Numerous car commercials have been filmed on this bridge. Unfortunately, the bridge was torn down in the last several years. They couldn't save it. It was just, they had built it with concrete that had too much alkaline content in it. It was rotting from the inside out. But I wanted to get a shot of a train going by the 6th Street Bridge before he took it down. So here we see a Metrolink train going away. That's the streak going down the right-hand track there. We're now moving to a new era for group night photo sessions, and that's the existing, or not existing light, fixed light era. These are now constantly lit lights. They're always on. They started out as being great big fluorescent lights, but now as LED technology has gotten better, we're now using smaller LED lamps to light these things. And let's just do things like this, where it's constantly lit. You wait for just the right moment to fire the camera and get scenes like this. And it's all handheld. It's bright enough that with the high ISOs, which are high ISOs are the real heroes of modern night photography. It's not the flashes, it's the high ISOs of digital photography. You can hand hold your camera. Don't need tripods, don't need cable releases. And when you see the scene the way you want it, you just fire the trigger. This is also a constant lit scene down at Cass. This is also constantly lit. And once again, we use the constant light to our advantage because you can fire the camera whenever you wanted to. We were set up at Cass for the night photo session. And the drunks across the river in East Cass at the bar, this is in May, started shooting off fireworks. It was right over the scene, right over the station. We're like, hey, that's really cool. So we were to get fireworks in the background for our scene here. And also with the constant lighting, I could do things like do night shots from my drone. Once again, we're at Cass. And once again, fireworks works well with constant lighting. Wilmington and Western ran their train up to Hockessin, Delaware for 4th of July last year. And I just used 2 small video lights. When the fireworks started off, I turned both lights on to light up the locomotive, and was enough light to get the locomotive and then get the fireworks captured overhead. Constant lighting lets us work with shadows. This is the Steam Railroading Institute in Owasso, Michigan. With the constant light, you can see exactly where the shadows are going to fall. Back in the old days with the group night photo sessions, using flashbulbs or even lumidines, the light was different wherever you were on the photo line. So the easiest way to light it was light everything. Now with the constant light, you can work shadows into the scenes, and people can cycle through to the best spot one at a time or a few at a time. You don't need to just light everything because you need to anymore. Also with constant light, this is inside a coach at the Virginia Museum of Transportation down in Roanoke. We got constant lighting out on the 1218 outside the window, and Charles Hardy here posing as a Pullman porter inside the coach. And things like this constantly lit. This is once again back up at Owasso, inside the turntable house. And Doyle McCormick checking his watch out in Portland, Oregon, with his locomotive, the 4449 behind him. And up at Wiscasset, Maine, on the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington, the 2-foot gauge railroad, a scene at the turntable. Once again, with the constant lighting, you just set it up, and then folks can cycle through to the best angle, and everybody gets the shot. And the constant lighting anymore is bright enough that you can handhold this too. So you don't need to fumble with tripods or anything. You just go walk up, click, 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 check it, adjust, click, 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 and you're done. No lighting was used here other than the firebox. This is on the Three Rivers Rambler down in Knoxville, Tennessee. And Kelly Lynch lighting up his lantern. Once again, just using the light that's available. High ISOs of modern digital cameras, they're the real heroes in night photography anymore. This shot here was in Woodstown, on the Woodstown Central, Santa Claus. This was an existing light, just using the light from the street lights with the moon up above the caboose. And also all existing light. This is Denver Union Station out in Colorado. This is not quite night, not quite day. This is the moon setting in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, over the Everett Railroad. And you can use the light that's just there. No flashes needed. This is handheld, modern digital photography. Vermont rail system train coming up through a grade crossing in the rain. Also in the rain, Woodstown Central in downtown Woodstown on a miserable night. And Wilmington and Western's Christmas lights train was steam powered one night. Went out and got this shot here. Once again, no flash needed. Handheld, using just the light that was there. Same thing, Wilmington and Western at the Falkland Woods Station, one of their Christmas lights train coming up, just using the camera's ISO to my advantage here. Same train a little bit later at night. Looking down from the cut at Wooddale, Delaware. And this is in Glendale, Ohio. You're taking advantage of the high ISOs as well as the rain and fog on a damp night. This is in St. Mary's, West Virginia, street running. Once again, only light was that provided by the street lights, handheld. This shot here is on the Western Maryland Scenic. They had just restored 1309, and I was out there on a Friday night they were running, and it was miserable. It was pouring rain. And I went up to Frostburg, and it was dark. And I'm like, well, why am I even bothering with this? But I got out of the car in the pouring rain, put my winter coat on not because it was cold, but because that was the thickest coat I had that would slow the rain down from getting to me and my camera. Went out into the rain, and as the engine came up, I'm like, this is crazy. I could barely see the engine. And I shot this at like ISO 12,000. And this is what I got. I'm pretty pleased with it, actually. Western Maryland Scenic, for whatever reason, has installed lights shining down from under the boiler onto the drivers. It's just for looks. It doesn't really, the railroad itself, C&O never had them on the locomotive. Just something the Western Maryland Scenic added, but it helps the shot. Back in the old days, we would go out on streetcars with our flash equipment and light everything up with flashes. Here we see a shot in media. But now we can do the same thing, but with just the light that's provided by the street lights and any other ambient light we have. Once again, in case you couldn't tell, we're still in media here. There is a hint in the photo. This is in Cincinnati of the connector. One of the things that high ISO cameras have done is opened up a whole new world of shooting light rail and streetcar systems at night. It's really cool. We're in Tacoma. That's Tacoma Union Station in the background. And in Toronto on the Bathurst Street Bridge, one of the new Flexity streetcars going across. We're in St. Paul, Minnesota, State Capitol building in the background, Hiawatha Light Rail in the foreground. And up in Mattapan, outside of Boston, PCC car. Downtown Kansas City, their streetcar system. And we're in Houston, Texas, looking down the light rail from a parking deck. And for about a block in the middle of downtown Houston, the streetcars kind of float out across this water feature in the middle of the right-of-way. Temple Square in Salt Lake City, Utah tracks. And back in media, Trolley Stop Motel. They have the best rates, but I will not vouch for any of the rooms there. There is a Wawa across the street, however. And we were out on a New Year's Eve charter down in towards Sharon Hill, and fog rolled in, and got this nice moody shot of a Kawasaki car. And the last night of PCC operations on Route 15 at the time, if you're going to shoot in Philadelphia, you might as well get a cheesesteak place in the background. So there's Joe's Steaks back there. And Portland, Oregon, go by streetcar. Good advice. One of my other passions of shooting stuff is neon. So a nice neon sign overhead there. Here we are in downtown Milwaukee, the Hop, going by the Milwaukee Public Market, once again with some nice neon. And the Elephant Car Wash in Tacoma. The Palms Hotel in Portland, Oregon. This hotel has since closed, but it's being converted to condos, but the sign is staying. Downtown Salt Lake City, the old Union Pacific station has a large neon UP shield on it. And you can do stuff like this. This is operator Gary Mason in a Kawasaki car, waiting to make a right-hand turn, probably up by 63rd and Malvern. Yeah, it was Gary decorates his streetcar for Christmas every year. So he had his Christmas car out for a charter. This is at twilight. This is actually some fill flash. This is just before sunset, or just after sunset, rather. Conestoga Creek in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. A little bit of fill flash to light up the train and the rocks in the foreground, but still have some orange in the sky from the setting sun. For this shot here, this is the Amtrak's Coke engine that was running a few years ago. I wanted to get the city skyline to light up, so I had to set the camera's high ISO up really high to get the city lights. But I needed one flash to light the locomotive up. Well, at the high ISO, the flash is going to blow everything out. So I took my flashes and I backed it way off. This is like 1/8 power on my flash, just to give enough light. So all you got to do is put some photons out there, and digital cameras will find them. It's just put enough photons out there to capture the locomotive. In fact, there was a police camera on the intersection out there to catch stoplight runners, and the flash on the camera out the intersection was brighter than the flash I was using that night on the train. This is Wilmington, Delaware. The M&T parking deck, or ING, I guess it's ING parking deck. About 3 blocks down from the station. Huntsville, Alabama. Saturn V is all lit up. So I had to expose for the Saturn V and then adjust my flashes so I didn't overpower the train to photograph this Norfolk Southern train going by it. The only upright Saturn V on display in the US. However, it is not a real Saturn V. It is a 1-to-1 scale model. For this shot here at the Golden Triangle in Pittsburgh, the incline, the Duquesne incline, was in complete darkness here. And I didn't have any flash with me as far as my usual strobes. So like, how can I get some flash on the incline? Well, what I wound up doing was I just popped up my camera's onboard flash and used it, and it put out enough light just to get the photons out there, and the digital cameras pick it up. Just enough photons hit the incline to light it up. This is the 113 C&J locomotive up in Minersville, Pennsylvania. For this, we had to expose for the sparks, then adjust the flashes accordingly. One flash was used here, just shooting across the nose of the locomotive to give some shadow and light contrast. And you use about a 2-second exposure for this to get the streaks of light from the work being done there on the table. This is the B&O holly tree down in Jackson Station near Perryville, Maryland. Once again, for this shot here, I had to expose a high enough ISO to get the lights from the holly tree in the background, and then back off on the strobes to light up the locomotive. For this shot here, I had put one strobe down the side, facing back towards me. You can see the strobe on the edge of the frame there to give some glint on the side. Then one strobe way across by the holly tree, shooting across just to get some light on the nose of the locomotive. This shot here at the Donaldson Bowl outside of Nashville, Tennessee, the Music City Star commuter train going by. Once again, I exposed for the neon sign and adjusted the flashes accordingly to light up the train in the background. As I've gotten more used to the strobes, I've started doing more different things with them. Instead of going with just a 3/4 lighting to light up everything, now I'm trying to create some shadows in the scene with some indirect lighting. This shot here, there's not a strobe with me on this side of the tracks. Most of the light is coming from either a strobe across the tracks on the nose or a strobe from behind the building shooting out to the side of the locomotive. Then you can see a strobe in the middle of the picture lighting up the water tank in the background. This is up at Stanton Station near Flemington. Once again, a strobe pointing back towards me to get some lit light on the side of the train. Then I had a strobe across the tracks shooting through some leaves to give some diffused light on the nose, which lets the headlight and number boards and ditch lights pop out better. You're not overpowering them with the strobe lights. Same thing. This is on the Washington Secondary. This is in Port Murray, New Jersey. Toys for Tots train coming back. No direct light on the nose here again. Light behind the train, light the trees up. You see the strobe in the back there facing back towards me to get some glint light on the side. And then one strobe way off to the right, just barely scraping the side of the station to give it some light. Same general setup in Three Bridges, New Jersey. I fired this shot just a tad too soon, and I caught the strobe in the background behind the engine. That was lighting up the front of the station. Once again, a strobe further down, shooting back towards me to give some glint light, but not a whole lot of light on the nose, letting the headlights and ditch lights do their work up front there. This is in Seoul, same basic setup. The strobe way off to the left, just barely grazing the side of the station to give some light and shadow detail on the side of the depot there. And the same thing in Winona. Let the shadows do their thing. Glendale, Ohio again. This is a combination of existing light and strobe. One strobe, you definitely see it, shooting back towards me to light up the glint on the side of the train. But everything else is existing light. The pub across the tracks, the crossing gates, everything else are all just existing light. Same thing on the Strasbourg. No direct light on the nose. A little bit of light behind the train just to give some separation out in the field there. And the same thing with the 89 at Groundhog Cut on the Strasbourg. Most of the light coming from behind the locomotive, facing back towards me, although there was one small strobe across the tracks at a very sharp angle to the train to give some shadow and light on the nose of the locomotive. But I really wanted to put all the light on this side of the tracks behind that first tree. I didn't want to light the first tree up directly. I wanted to backlight that first tree, leave the trunk facing me in the dark. So, like I said, we owe all of this to Winston Link. He's the guy who started it all back in the 1950s. No one will ever equal what he did. However, he still inspires us. Recently at the East Broad Top, we built a drive-in theater in the East Broad Top parking lot and set up the famous Winston Link drive-in shot from Yeager, West Virginia. Number 16 on the East Broad Top stood in for a Class Y Norfolk and Western locomotive. Once again, this is with fixed lighting, so we all just cycled through one at a time to get the best angle here with the drive-in screen. And the picture on the screen is actually being projected by a digital projector hidden down in front of the first row of cars. So even today, Mr. Link still inspires us, and we keep on going out there in the dark and shooting our night photos. Thank you very much. Going from beginning to end, the old Lumidynes were good for about 75 or 80 flashes. They're rechargeable. We get into the Alien Bs though, their batteries are a bit heftier, and the battery science has gotten a lot better. Each of the Alien B batteries will last for about 300 flashes. And then the constant lighting, that is a bit tougher because you either need a generator, or now we're using like batteries the size of motorcycle batteries. That'll last about 30 or 40 minutes before, because there's a constant drain on that. Yeah, for all the synchronized stuff with the Alien Bs, I set the flashes up, turn them all on, and they can just sit there for 3 or 4 hours. I don't need to turn them off between trains or anything. Don't need to run down the tracks and turn them all back on again or anything. Just turn them on, leave them on, and wait for the train to come.
Tell us about Grenada, Mississippi. Who owned those high-speed payment locomotives, and what is the operation through there?
That was the Grenada Railway, and it was owned by Iowa Pacific Holdings. Iowa Pacific Holdings put together a pretty decent passenger empire and shortline empire. And they were actually the contractor for running Amtrak's Hoosier State on the days the Cardinal didn't run between Chicago and Indianapolis. Unfortunately, Iowa Pacific was built on a house of cards, and it collapsed financially. Just came down all at once into bankruptcy. All of their equipment has been scattered either through sale or auction. URHS actually, I don't know why they did it. URHS actually leased them to the 2 Lehigh Valley F units, and they went down to Mississippi, and they got trapped down there. They got hung up in the bankruptcy. Ever do black and white at night? I don't set out to do black and white at night. I shoot everything in color because you can always convert to black and white later. I do sometimes think that, hey, this is going to look really good in black and white. In fact, one of the Strasbourg shots I showed tonight, the 475, actually looks better in black and white. But I'll sometimes go into a shot thinking, hey, this might be a good conversion for later on. But everything gets shot in color initially, and if the black and white doesn't work out, I still have the color to fall back on.